Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our December 13th Tri-Board meeting. I'll call this meeting of the Select Board to order at 7:02.
I'll call this meeting of the school committee to order at 7:02.
Good evening. I will call the meeting of the North Andover Finance Committee at 7:03.
I knew you were going to do that.
It knows how to count.
That's right. If
got
everyone
it.
could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will start with public comment this evening. Per the Select Board policy, public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between citizens and the Select Board. It is a citizen's opportunity to express his or her opinion on issues of town business. The board may respond to a public comment by taking it under consideration when deliberating on an agenda item or referring it to the item to the administration for appropriate action or response. Public comment shall be for a period of up to 15 minutes, with speakers being allowed 3 minutes to present their material. Is anyone here for public comment? No? Okay. Then we will move on to our first item, which is the 5-year fiscal forecasts. And I'll hand it over to Melissa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my honor to present our 5-year fiscal forecast looking at fiscal years 2025 through 2029. The financial condition of the town is that we continue to maintain our AAA bond rating. That rating reflects our strong economy, our strong financial management, and our budgetary performances annually. We have again received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. Thank you. And received the Government Finance Officers Association Budget Award. This is a list of our reserves. Annually we do make transfers into these accounts at town meeting, particularly the stabilization and capital stabilization account, as well as the OPEB trust. Our free cash number for fiscal year 24 is $12.1 million. The plan that we'll present later today for the capital improvement plans to use about half of that and leave half for other things and to continue to carry over year to year. Historically, if you look at our free cash, we have been carrying around $6 million and creating or raising about $6 million a year, which is right about where we should be, the $6 million number. That $6 million that we're carrying, we've been using a little bit as a savings account as we're moving towards a lot of these facilities master plan projects. So the reason we do a projected financial forecast annually is that it is a wonderful policy-making tool for us. It allows us to realize if we're going to have issues moving forward, and for us to consider and correct any potential issues that we do see. It's really just educated estimates. We base them on our past expenditures and revenues and the expertise of our town staff, like Bill and Lynn. And it's most effective when we look at a really short period of time, which is why we only go out 5 years. It's not going to be detailed, and it is conservative. And it's always going to be conservative looking forward. It is a really good budget practice. It is one of our financial policies, and our bond rating agencies look on it favorably. And when we go through our assessment to take bonds for the middle school or Kittredge, they'll ask us if we do this exercise or not. So some of you have seen these presentations before, but for those of you that haven't, we do have 4 major categories of revenues in town: real estate and personal property taxes, intergovernmental aid, local receipts, and then miscellaneous revenue. Annually, when we begin our budget process, we review the revenues from the prior years, looking for trends and anomalies. We do that with the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee so that we can figure out how we begin to build our budget. So that exercise has already started for the revenues, and soon will start for the fixed costs as well. This is early for forecasting, so those numbers are early estimates, and they may change as we move through the process. Remember, last year, we saw changes in new growth right as we were going to print the budget book. Chapter 70 may come in differently than we expected when we create this budget. The biggest bucket of our revenues is our real estate and property taxes. They account for about 78% of the budget. The tax levy, for those who don't know, is the amount that we as a community can raise through property tax. There's two ways that that can be increased. It's 2.5% annually per state law, and then it can be raised through a different mechanism that usually involves a vote, which would be debt or capital exclusions or an override. A debt or capital exclusion, which we do have some of, are just temporary increases to tax levy limits. So if you do a capital exclusion to buy a fire truck and the debt is for 10 years, at the end of that 10-year period, that exclusion goes away. An override is a permanent increase, and the only way to take that away is to actually do an underride. And then finally, we have new growth, which are taxes that can be attributed to anything that's new coming on the tax levy. So if a lot of the time what we'll see is maybe a small new subdivision, a business that makes improvements. So this chart is actually a chart that Bill Mitchell created to share with the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee, and I said, this is so helpful, so I stole it and put it in mine. And what it does is it shows us our average projected growth in a typical year. So typically we would have no major new residential projects, not a lot of new homes, maybe one or two. We'd have some minimal commercial growth, a little bit of industrial growth, and some personal property. In personal property, as you know, that's the things inside of the building, right? That are not attached to the building, but are equipment, et cetera, and that we're allowed to tax on, and we use the commercial rate on that. So our average new growth is typically around $655,000 a year. In fiscal year 25, we're going to be having extraordinary new growth again, because we do have the rest of Amazon's personal property coming on. We have less than usual when it comes to our residential, commercial, industrial. That's lined up like normal. We don't have a lot of other new personal property besides Amazon accounted for. So we're looking at our $380,000 average and Amazon for a total of $1.8 million in fiscal year 25 new growth coming on. Historically, this is what our new growth looks like. As you can see, in the fiscal year 23 is when Amazon came on and we had the large spike. But typically, new growth really does hover around that $650,000 number. Just another way of looking at it. So you can see that our new growth in the last few years has been higher, and a lot of that is because of things like Amazon and other buildings that we have seen come up that have just been outside of the norm. We're not thinking we're going to see this moving forward for fiscal year 26, 27, 28. If we were, those people would already be talking to Paul Hutchins at the building department. They'd already be before the planning board. They'd already be before ZBA, and we're just not seeing that. So we are forecasting normal new growth after this year. The second bucket of money that makes up our budget is intergovernmental revenue. And so that's about 11.6%. That's Chapter 70, which is funding for schools, unrestricted general government aid, and veterans benefits. The veterans benefits are 75% reimbursement of what we spend annually on benefits from our budget. So that's how that's made up. This year, Chapter 70 was about $11.9 million. General government was $3.1 million in our assessments that we pay back to the state. So we get a fun sheet that says, this is how much we're giving you, and this is how much you're going to pay immediately back to us, was $762,000. We use any increases in intergovernmental revenue in the next year. And the reason for that is that the state budget is set so much later. You would think that we would somehow all get it together, but we haven't. And unfortunately, the state budget this year wasn't approved until August. So it would be very difficult for us to use those numbers when our budget starts on July 1st. The next bucket is local receipts. That accounts for about 9% of all of our revenues, and that's based on our local fees, fines, permits, and other charges. So things like motor vehicle excise, meals and lodging, pilots, penalties, investment income are all things that would go into this bucket. We had, during COVID, seen this suffer pretty kind of incredibly. I don't think I'd ever seen local receipts decrease before. A lot of that was because cars were not available, so people were not buying new cars. People weren't really going out to eat. We finally have seen this start to level off, and we're accounting for a 3% annual increase moving forward. The final bucket is our operating transfer and other revenue. That accounts for about 1.5% of our income. It's comprised of actual revenue received, and a lot of that is just the indirect costs from the enterprise funds. So if you remember correctly, we have enterprise funds for water and sewer. And what we do is we actually charge them for things like health insurance, tax collector, Lynn's time, and they pay back the general fund budget for those things. And we're projecting a 2.5% increase in those as we move forward. So again, this just shows you that really our budget is built mostly on the tax levy. Not unusual for a community like ours, but it's pretty substantial here. So these are our revenue projections moving forward. Again, they're conservative, and it's really just an estimate at this point. You know, the one that we're most focused on obviously is fiscal year 25 as we're building that budget. I mean, one thing you can see from this chart is that we're estimating new growth, again, like we told you, at the 1.8, and then slowly seeing it start to go down. Our debt exclusion is actually falling off in fiscal year 27, so we will not have that debt exclusion to pay any longer. So that's something that's a little bit different. So the next thing that we do is we forecast what our potential expenses are going to look like, what we know, right? So these are generally what our expenses that make up our budget. And we think about what those fixed costs are. What do we already have contracts for, right? We know our RICO contract for copiers moving forward for the next 3 years. We know how much we pay for postage typically. And so those are things that we can easily figure out. We know what our step increases are going to be like. We've negotiated some of our CBAs, so we're able to, at least for fiscal year 25, place those in. What we can't account for is emergencies, changes that the state or federal government might make that we then have to absorb in many ways. But it's really kind of an exercise of us trying to figure out, oh, in this year, we know that trash is going to cost this much more, so we need to account for that. And so we use those tools to create these budget drivers. This year, we're accounting for a 2% COLA for the town employees, and we're accounting for 7% for some of our fixed costs like insurances. So this is our expenditure forecast moving forward. We're looking at a 5.5% increase for the schools in fiscal year 25, not including the positions at the middle school, which are currently in a salary reserve. I think I had told them 5.34, so 5.5 is the number. Surprise. But we have those middle school positions in a reserve, and we will move those when they are ready for that. After fiscal year 25, the school's percentage does drop to 4% increase per year because, as I showed you, new growth is going to be leveling off. This is our estimated retirement appropriation. So as you know, the state also requires us to pay a certain amount of retirement annually. That is also forecasted to increase about 6 to 7% a year. In fiscal year 36, we'll actually be caught up with the state payments. Totally funded, which is amazing. A lot of communities pushed that out to 42 or 45 or 47. We did not. So 36 sounds really far away, but who would think we'd be talking about 25? So, you know, that's something that we'll have to start planning how we want to use that money moving forward. This is a chart that just shows kind of what our breakdown of those expenditures are. The schools show 49% here. It really ends up being a little bit more like 69% when you include personal benefits and the shared services that we share together. But it's interesting, and I think it's always historically hovered around that 50% point. So this is the don't panic page because I don't want you to panic. So, you know, it always shows upside down into the future, although we are showing a $2 surplus in fiscal year 25. So it always is upside down. It's always probably going to be upside down as we're forecasting, but things come up, we make changes, contracts get better, we come up with solutions, and we are able to turn it around. So I don't want anyone to look at that and go, oh my God. But this is what we're looking at, particularly for fiscal year 25. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I do have one question, more curiosity question. So I noticed, like, obviously you talked about is that our new growth number tends to be around 600,000. It's been like that for a long time. Mm-hmm. Prior to the long time, it was a deficit usually. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, why does it continue to stay about the same number? Or it's just the way it happened?
I mean, I think a lot of it is just the nature of what we see in town. We don't have a lot of space to build, right? So what you're going to see is going to be pretty much the same thing every year, and a lot of that is just improvements, right? We're not really seeing any new subdivisions of big size anymore or anything like that. And so I think that's why it's pretty much leveled off as far as new growth goes. You also mentioned free cash when you were talking about that and the deficits. I think that was part of your question.
Not really, but go ahead. And
Oh, I was going to say, for free cash, we did for a long time prior to the 2010 timeframe use free cash to supplement the budget. And then I think basically what happened is everybody had no free cash in 2008, 2009, 2010. So that created those deficits.
But isn't the 600,000 just a planning number? It's really,
It's the number we use for planning, but it's a
Yeah.
pretty solid number based on history. The last 5 years being a really
Yeah, we
kind of
got the last
interesting
5 years,
anomaly,
yeah.
right? It makes it really difficult. A lot of time when we forecast, we'll look at the last 5 years, right? And it's a good tool to look at. If we did that with this and we tried to move the budget forward, we would be in big trouble in a couple of years because it's just not going to come to fruition. It's easier to do that with motor vehicle excise, or building permit fees even is one that's hard to forecast. Right.
Well, it's better to go low or right on the money, because trying to find the money after the fact is not a good thing.
Right. Nobody wants to go back to town meeting and decrease the
Yeah.
budget.
So, I mean, your planning is good in that regard. Better to be conservative than, be in shock. Yeah.
How are you accounting for the Stevens estate? How are you projecting that?
So we have pending legislation to put that into a revolving account. We haven't gotten approvals on that yet. I'm hoping that we do before we have to create this budget. If not, we'll just do the same thing we did this year, which was we use the Stevens estate as revenue, and we create a budget for the pretty much exact same amount.
Yeah.
It's not, to me, a great way to do it because we're trying to save money for that building. This year was good because we got a ton of work done. And if you haven't been there, it's amazing. But moving forward, we really want to have that revolving account created because we want to be able to carry that money from year to year to be able to invest money into the estate moving as we go forward.
As we move forward, yeah. With the capital plan that.
Yeah, so we
We're
have a
working on,
capital plan
right.
created. But until that revolving account is situated, it makes it difficult to kind of think about how we're going to move forward. Based on our the last conversation that I had with the manager, they think they'll exceed the revenue for this year, which is exciting.
And we'll get over that threshold.
Yes.
If you haven't been, it's beautiful.
Yeah, they've done a
It's
really nice job.
absolutely stunning. Yeah.
There are, oops, sorry, go ahead.
All right, so a quick one, Melissa, the pie chart. You mentioned that the schools were really, they were shown as 49%, but you mentioned they're really 69% because I didn't catch what you said.
Oh, because
The rest of that.
every year, Jim and Lynn sit down and they create kind of a document that shows exactly how much of the budget the schools are. And I assume that you do that for school spending, for people's expenditures. But it's more than 49% because the group health insurance, the other personnel benefits, and other non-departmental, also a portion of that all go into the schools.
Okay, thank you.
There's very modest state aid increases over the next few years, which is probably accurate, but historically, I know like outside of say 2020 through now, how often have they level funded? I feel like we might be heading in that direction.
So I have a chart for Chapter 70. So I don't know if anyone else is as nerdy as me, but DLS has created this really cool data book now that has a lot of charts to check out. So it's very exciting.
That's cool.
So I did look for Chapter 70. I didn't put this in your thing. It's just my way to answer. So this is looking back to fiscal year 16. I mean, you can see in 16 and 19 there was increases that were substantial, like 23 and 24 were. But unfortunately, 18, 20, 21, 22 were not substantial increases.
Okay. That's what I would I think, yeah.
And we don't tend to see big increases in the general at all. That used to be the lottery money. I mean, it's really, you don't really see. And if it is, it usually goes hand in hand with an assessment.
Figures.
Do they give you any sort of warning, like that
When the assessments change? No.
When the Chapter 70, that we're gonna go back to more level funding, or?
So Chapter 70 won't go down. We just won't see as big increases. And that's typically what, and Jim's looking at me and he's nodding. You don't typically see Chapter 70 ever decrease, which is good because our enrollment's down, right? So we wouldn't want to see that. But I don't forecast that we'll see large increases like this again.
So even if our enrollment declines, it still will not, Chapter 70 still will not decrease.
You're usually held whole.
Okay.
Two quick questions. Can you just remind everybody what's coming off with debt exclusion? Is it
The high
the high
school.
school and the Thompson, or is it just the high school?
Just the high school.
Okay. And then quick follow-up. So this may be wrong slide. For the estimated retirement appropriation that's there, obviously we're paying in, we'll have that done by 2036, you said. And had we not done that, would we be paying additional by rolling it out to, I think you said 2042 or 20?
It would be the same amount of money that we would pay. We just would have to do it for longer. There's
Okay.
no interest on it. The state didn't charge any interest.
That's what I was trying to
They
figure out.
just
If there's
extend, a
interest.
lot of communities extended it to pay less. This community did not. The communities that extended were really back around 2012, 2013, when everyone was recovering from the 2008 to 2012 era.
Yep.
Most communities tried not to because they knew that eventually they would need this money for other things like OPEB and big building projects. So,
Right.
but it wouldn't be any more that you'd be paying.
Okay.
And when that
Thank you.
ends in fiscal year 36, that money goes into the operating budget, or? Yeah.
So I guess we'll see, right? So,
Tell me right now
you
what
know, by then, yeah, it's quite a ways away. If my conspiracy theory is that they're gonna make a requirement for OPEB that's gonna mirror the pension requirement, but I don't know what will happen.
So Melissa, so I got to the don't panic page, and I didn't panic, but I did go back and look at a handful of years and saw that it's kind of been all over the place, right?
Absolutely.
Do you see anything in there that you would consistently say we're traditionally always undercut? We're always surprised by X or one factor or another that overperforms or underperforms?
It's always different looking back, don't you think? All of a sudden, motor vehicle exercise will take like a huge, exciting plunge, or it will go up, right? Which is not something we really control. The state is the one who determines the values of cars. There's no really any consistent thing that we're under revenuing at all based on the forecast. Right. I just made a new word, revenuing. I don't know if you heard that, use that as a verb,
I
which
guess
is
my question
great.
Historically, do you find yourself making up the gap on the revenue side or on the expense side?
So it's always different. When you first start in a community, you tend to find a lot of places that you can make cuts, right? So when first year that I was here, we made a lot of changes and streamlined a lot of things, and we're able to make cuts that way. The last couple of years, we've had this new growth here that has just been extraordinary. So we haven't had to really be as tight as we were that first year. A lot of the time, the goal is not to reduce service, right? So a lot of the time it's, can we find ways to streamline? Are there things that we can either insource or outsource, depending on what the changes look like? Do you move to leases for some things that maybe you were buying before? The tight years require a lot of creativity.
Any further questions? No? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to the capital improvement plan.
So we have all of our department heads, or most of them anyway, here with us today to help us with any of the questions you may have about the individual items. First, I want to show you, we have an amazing, Lynn decided she was gonna go out with a bang. She was like, this is my last one, I'm gonna do it right. So she created this amazing, and partnered with ClearGov, who does all of our budget transparency, and created a digital book this year. So we're going to have a digital budget book. We also have a digital capital improvement plan. You can get to it right from our homepage where it says digital budget book in big letters. And you can basically slide through has a drop-down menu, lets you go to every single project, creates really cool graphs for you. And what's even better about it is that once we get through town meeting, we'll have actual project pages for each and every single one of the capital items. So you'll be able to see us kind of as we're spending the money, as things are getting done, being updated on this page. So we're very excited about this. Lynn did a lot of work on it. I enjoyed it this year. It's live now. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
No, great. All right, so this is the capital improvement plan for fiscal year 25. And for those of you that don't know, a capital improvement item is something that's tangible, or a project. It costs more than $25,000 and it has a lifespan of at least 5 years. What a capital improvement plan does is it really provides a planning schedule for the town, and it also defines what our financing options will be as we move forward. The capital budget is what we vote on at town meeting. It's the next year's spending plan. We typically use funding in the operating budget for all items under $50,000. Doing that creates capacity for us to do routine items, but then also allows us to use things like free cash or the capital stabilization account or bonding to do the larger things. Having that $50,000 threshold in the budget, in my opinion, is huge, especially for rolling stock. If you don't have that in your budget, you may scrimp on doing things like buying cruisers or buying admin vehicles, which is not something you want to scrimp on. And so building it in that way really gives us a mechanism to continue to do it annually. So every year, what we do is we have the department heads and the schools submit and they prioritize their requests. This year, we had more requests, I think, than ever. So in a lot of that, so many different reasons. We're finally getting through Columbia Gas. We had the storm, so we have some things that had to get reprioritized due to the storm, just things that were kind of unusual. And so what we do is Lynn and I evaluate the requests, and then we have a group meeting to discuss them, listen to people's concerns, and to talk about the funding mechanisms. What's really amazing is that this group listens to each other and tries to problem solve about how we get each other's projects done. So somebody will say, you know what, that can actually wait a year because your project sounds like it's really necessary. And so watching that happen and the teamwork behind that is actually very moving. You're all welcome to come watch. I'm probably the only one who enjoys it as much, maybe Lynn, but it's really nice to see. So this year, for the 5-year period, we have 56 projects totaling $159 million. For our fiscal year 25, we have 27 projects totaling $28.9 million. We have routine items, we have new items, and then we have Facilities Master Plan 2. And as we flip through, you'll see that our new program actually allows us to break these all out in a much friendlier way. So for rolling stock, we have a ladder truck replacement, we have a new ambulance, we have a water utility truck replacement, and we have a 6-wheel dump truck. The 6-wheel dump truck, we're trying to be a little bit creative right now. So there is a very long wait for vehicles. Fire trucks are 24 months out, ambulances are 24 months out. The dump truck, I think, is also 24 months out. And it's a little bit painful to pay for an entire vehicle when we know we're not going to receive it for 2 more years. So we've been working with our vendors to pay deposits so that we can do a deposit in 1 year and then the payment in the next year or the year after that when upon receipt of vehicle, so that we're not using all of our money. But we also don't want to be in a situation where we need a new ladder truck and we finally appropriate the money and we have to wait 2 years. So for the ladder truck, it's a little bit different. They don't take deposits. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a short-term bond for this. So we're going to take debt. We won't probably ever actually take the debt, but we are going to do that in order to sign the contract, and then you'll see it in a future capital plan coming from a different funding source. We have our usual routine items like municipal IT transfers and all the wonderful things that John Hyland does to keep our system safe. He actually just received a $118,000 grant this week for our phone lines to move them over so they're not in a building so that we can continue to have phone access during emergencies. We have our Facilities Master Plan 2 implementation. So that is both the design of the Fire Station 2 addition as well as the rest of the design for the Kittredge. So if you remember correctly, last year we transferred money, and the year before that, we transferred money into the capital stabilization account to save for these designs. And so we're going to be using that. We have $1.2 million for the ABECC. That quote came in today a little higher, so Jim and I have some work to do on that. We have the high school track resurfacing. Unfortunately, during the flood, the track ended up entirely underwater, and that caused a lifting of the surface. We've been trying desperately to get our insurance company to cover that. We're not sure what's going to happen, so we're including it in the budget this year. We have renovation to the stage of the town common, which we're actually putting a CPC application in for. If any of you have been on that stage, it's a little uneasy, so we're looking forward to improving that. We have some district-wide exterior maintenance, the stable at the Stevens Estate. That's going to also be a CPC application. We have some money for the former senior center reuse, which really is just kind of cosmetic to get that up and ready for some new uses. We have flooring at the Franklin School. We have our usual roadway improvements. The next steps in the Fields Master Plan implementation, which is the design of the high school. We have water main replacements, improvements to water treatment plants, a sewer project on Ray Street, which we're using ARPA funds for, our usual culvert and drainage, some sewer improvements at the police station, our usual sidewalk improvements, IT at the schools, improvements to our water booster system, and playground improvements, which we do every year as well. We have a roof replacement, so I think 3 or 4 buildings, a regular building maintenance and repairs account that Steve Foster manages, and then our HVAC. So this is our capital cost by department. So you can see it's broken out, kind of showing you where the money is being spent and where it is going. The orange is the town manager, and that accounts for the facilities master plan. And this breaks down basically the different funding sources that we're going to be using. So as I mentioned, we have the opera project for Ray Street, the capital stabilization account that's going to be paying for our designs, Chapter 90, which is a straight grant that we get every year, our 2 CPA applications, money that's going to be paid from the general fund, and then and that includes free cash, and then also the sewer and water enterprise fund. As I mentioned in the last presentation, we're planning on using about $6 million of free cash. The rest will be either operating out of that general fund number, will be either operating, and then we're also going to be using debt reserved. So if you remember correctly, we are kind of holding on to debt. We're not letting it get gobbled up into the budget because we want to use it to pay for Facilities Master Plan 2 as we move forward. But we won't need it all this year, so we're going to use it. Right now, we have it framed to be used for the ABECC. Oh, and I should add that the ambulance and the other, so last year at town meeting, Chief Ware had a great idea to create a revolving account for some of the reimbursements that we get from the state, and we're actually going to be using those reimbursements to purchase an ambulance. So it's exciting. One of the major things that we're doing, and I'm going to continue to talk about this every year because I don't want anyone to forget, is the continuation of Facilities Master Plan 2. These projects are in no particular order. This is the order. And so the red is what we're actually already appropriated and working on. So as you know, we have broke ground on the middle school. It's actually going really well, and we're excited to see it kind of go up. The road's in, the foundation's been poured. And so we're looking forward to continuing that success. The Kittredge is in design right now. We're working with the MSBA. The rest of the design funds, so we're in feasibility. The rest of the design funds will be appropriated in fiscal year 25. The fire station, we're going to design in fiscal year 25, and we'll see that constructed in fiscal year 26. So we've got a lot of things moving with Facilities Master Plan 2. There is a lot of information available on our website and Master Plan Monday. So definitely continue to check that out. Just a reminder, the total cost of all of these projects is $139 million. If we did it today, all of them, using that recommended order, it's $166 million. We're doing it over a 15-year period, and we're accounting for inflation. So we've got 3% for operating and 5% for construction. And it's an all-in approach. So technology, fixtures, operating costs in the future, including staff, OPEB, Medicare, everything is accounted for when we created this plan.
Which is not how we've done it in the past, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that, I haven't seen many places that have done it like that. I think it's a good approach because I don't the worst thing that happens is we build a new school, we've got 11 classrooms, and then we're like, oh, we don't have teachers. Or, we build a building like this and no one accounts for the fact that we're going to have increased electricity because it's twice as big, right? Jim Stanford did, thank God. But, we have to make sure we do that. So I like this approach. I think it's a very honest approach, and I think people can buy into it because we're doing it that way.
I think
So.
we like it too.
Good, I'm glad. So again, the rest of the Kittredge design and the fire station design will both be in this year. They're both coming from that transfer from capital stabilization that we saved. We'll still, at the end of these two transfers, have $4.5 million in there. So we can continue to use that for design, and I think that's a really good tool as we move forward. In the future years, we're going to be using that debt capacity, we'll be using free cash, and we'll be using the capital stabilization. And I know this is school committee members McDevitt's favorite slide. So the impact to the average single family for Facilities Master Plan 2 in fiscal year 25 will again be 0, which is very exciting. So we'll have the middle school addition with no impact. We'll be doing the fire station design with no impact, and we'll be doing the Kittredge design with no impact. Finally, we do have 2 other capital improvement plans that we do. One is sewer and one is water. I did run through those projects when we looked at them before, but I just want to show you we do plan for those moving forward as well. Right now in the sewer account, we have retained earnings of $3.6 million. Retained earnings is kind of like the free cash of the sewer enterprise fund. And then same with water. We plan for that as well, and that retained earnings is about $5.1 million at this point. So just an idea of our debt by type. Thought this was kind of an interesting chart. Wanted to share with you. You can see a lot of the debt is related to Facilities Master Plan. We actually haven't taken any debt except the middle school, right? Any new debt since I've been here. So this is our principal and interest payments moving forward from fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 29. All of this is available in that budget book. And then finally, as we discussed, this is our excluded debt, and it is going to be falling off as we move into fiscal year 27. And again, we have all of our department heads, majority of them here. If you have any questions about the individual items, I know this is all new, and we are happy to, of course, attend any of your meetings that you have questions about the individual projects. Sure.
The ARPA funds. That's $350,000 that we have in the books. So I know it has to be obligated by a certain date and then spent by a certain date. I just couldn't remember when.
Yeah, so obligated by 2025, spent by 2026.
Thank you.
It's a lot of great information.
It's a lot.
Were there, I could be wrong about this, but there were certain paving projects that I feel like were supposed to happen, like maybe High Street, Prescott Street, like they were supposed to happen this season, and I don't know that they did, and I think we're past.
We're not paving anything right now,
We're
that's
past
for sure,
paving.
in this weather.
So will the,
Jim and
is that
John, do you
like
want
a-
to come up and
Come
address
on,
where
Jim.
we are with paving? I can't see which one. They're pointing at each other, aren't they? Yes.
sorry. So sorry.
Okay. So the question was High Street, right?
So and maybe I'm wrong about the timing or whatever, but was High Street and Prescott Street supposed to be done this
High
past-
Street was, yes.
Okay.
We ended up, I was able to get Gray Pond Road done. So that was the focus before the cold weather came upon us, after all the contracts were together with our contractor and whatnot. But High Street is on the agenda.
So it is
for the spring.
funded, it will be funded. It's
Oh,
funded
it's already
because
funded.
it's already funded. I
It's
just want to
already
make sure
funded.
that,
Yes,
okay.
yeah. No, it's already funded. So High Street is scheduled hopefully in the springtime to essentially do from Prescott. Actually, it's going to be from Water Street all the way to the Sutton High Chadwick intersection. And actually, that intersection's already funded also. So that's going to happen in the springtime where that's reconfigured. That's the one we got the Complete Streets grant.
Just wanted
And the sidewalks. And the sidewalks on High Street. I get a lot of calls on those sidewalks.
Yes.
Those are included also.
we get a lot of calls on those sidewalks.
Yes, yes. So yeah, that's definitely part of the plan.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it didn't fall by the wayside.
Oh, no,
for
no, no,
some
it's all
reason,
funded,
and
that's
now-
in there.
Okay.
Yep.
It just didn't happen in time.
Will High Street be the priority and then the fiscal year 25 projects will follow?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, because that's already funded. So that come springtime, my contractor is good to go. I've already given him the list. So
Okay.
he has that. He's ready to go come the springtime on that. And then once we get the funding, everything passes in July 1st, then we can look at those
Then you
projects.
move on to fiscal year 25 projects.
And
Yep.
Got it.
That will be the end of the we have one more round of Columbia back.
Oh, well,
gas
the Columbia
payment.
gas, yes, that's going to be all done next
the-
year also.
Okay.
So the goal is to get it done as soon as possible. We're shooting for June, July timeframe to have all of the Columbia gas restoration completed.
That's a lot.
They've been
High
fairly
Street.
There's a
You
lot.
guys will be busy in the spring.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a lot of road work definitely for
And,
sure.
yeah, the residents have been exceedingly patient, so I just
And
wanna
then they
make
have,
sure
they
it's
have. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yep, that's all gonna get
still on the
done.
horizon. So,
Yes,
Thank you.
you're very welcome.
Super quick. There used to be a couple of years ago a place where residents could go and kind of just see when their street, or they might inquire about a street and when it was projected.
Yep.
Where is that on the website now? If it, I assume it still is.
So we used to, I think what you're talking about is the pavement
Paving
management schedule. So it was a 5-year that was typically posted on the website. What we found coming out of COVID is because the expenses had escalated so much, I can't go out that far anymore
Okay.
because I just don't know what the costs are going to be. What I used to have money to do, the roads, I have maybe 2/3 that I can get done with the same amount of money. So what we've done now is we've cut it down to essentially the 1 year. So it's the FY 25. Any resident can always call my office though, and I can look up their road. And based on that rating, I can give them an idea of when we're gonna come up.
All right. I knew that I had seen it in the past.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, maybe it's
Yeah,
on the website,
and
I
again, it
just
was
missed
the
but-
5-year projection that we used to do. And again, the director and I talked, and I'm like, because once it's put out there, every resident's like, you said you're going to do this
Right,
on
yeah,
and I'm like,
Yep.
I just don't have the money. I can't
Okay.
do that. So,
All right. Fair enough. Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Melissa, could you remind people when construction of Kittredge is anticipated, because you have the construction?
Sure.
dates
Or
for
I
the
can.
others.
We just had this call with MSBA. Jim, do you want to answer instead? Sure. Okay. Well, we need to get him a microphone. Thank you. We're fighting the limits. of
Close
the
enough.
microphone.
So we warned that the timeline gets moved out when you participate with MSBA, and that certainly is the case. We recently brought on our OPM, the owns project manager, and it's Colliers, which is the same company that we have for the middle school. So we're familiar with them. We've seen them in action, and they're very good. And they provided us with the timeline, and it's looking like FY 29 is when construction will start for Kittredge. I said start. It should finish in FY 29.
Break ground in FY 20.
Yeah.
Break ground in FY 27.
That would really be pushing it out. Yes. But it's a once it starts, it's FY 27 when it starts. And it's a 2-year anticipated because it's existing, obviously, and we're on the same site. So FY 29 will be completion.
But the estimated reimbursement is currently 49%.
Point something, right?
Right. So it is, I believe, worth the wait. Yeah. So we're very excited. The schools have done a great job moving that forward, along with Laurie Burzlaff, who's been running all the facilities master plan 2 projects. When will the plan be finished is the question.
The plan, the design plan? So that's a very good question because it's good for people to understand the process is very inclusive. What we have to do and what the design firm will have to do is solicit feedback from the community obviously from us as well, and put together multiple options. We keep saying new Kittredge, and that's what we anticipated being, but we're going to have them design a few different options for renovations and a few different options, whether it's where it's located on the site or what the building looks like for new. So they're going to have to develop those over the next 18 months. They'll be developing those, but what you'll see is there'll be public forums soliciting feedback, and people will be kind of kept up to date of the process.
As a new neighbor, I just have
Yeah, exactly.
Very excited. I'm thrilled about the school.
So will there be a debt exclusion override?
Will there be a debt exclusion override for Kittredge? No.
No?
No override.
The first debt exclusion is.
Well, so technically, the first debt exclusion will be in 2028 for Atkinson.
Yep.
Does the long timeline of Kittredge, do we see that impacting the rest of the plan in any way? I don't.
No, if anything, we'll just continue to hold debt, hold that capacity as long as we can, which is okay,
And
right?
Because these are such long-term projects, can we continue to apply for MSBA funding for these other projects? Like, if we start now, maybe by the time we get to fiscal year
Right.
36, they'll throw us some money for a gym. I just feel like I think they'll probably make some changes to MSBA in that time that might be helpful to us, more project-based, so.
I mean, we're all watching the conversation right now about the municipal buildings.
Yeah.
They're looking right
Yes.
now at a process like MSBA for municipal buildings, right? If that passed, that could change the entire plan too, right? So
We're hopeful
there's so many different things that can happen as we move forward, and that's why the plan is helpful, but we have to be able to pivot too. So
I think it's important to understand that they get a lot of applications, and the fact that we got in for Kittredge was great. I mean, we had multiple projects. We had Atkinson, Franklin. The middle school had been applied for a few years, and we didn't get in. They had advised us, put your worst foot forward. I use that expression a lot when we did the public forums. And that's why Kittredge was put there and got through. We will always try, but I wouldn't hold out a lot of hope for us getting additional.
Agreed, but yeah, it feels silly to not at least try.
Yep. Well, I have the mic. I had a question on Franklin. We talked about construction in FY26, but we didn't mention design of the gym for Franklin.
well, I think when we probably created this, we didn't realize how much was going to go into the ABECC design either. So we'll have to think about that. Maybe we flip things around. Jim and I will have to put our heads together.
Meaning you didn't expect the detailed design required for a gym?
So I think when we originally did the ABECC, we didn't expect it to come in where, I don't think we thought the design would cost what it ended up costing.
So it's a good example of what John was talking about, prices. We weren't sure. We had done the Kittredge gym in the same format we're using for the ABECC, which is prefab. It's worked out really well. That one cost us $1 million for a full-size gym. This one, we would anticipate being about 2/3 the size of that, and so we were hopeful at 1.2 million, and it's coming in at 2.1. So, indicative of what's happening with prices.
Yeah, they haven't come back.
So we'll have to redesign or figure out something for that one.
But just like we say, things are constantly changing. This just came up, what was that, Tuesday?
Yep.
So, we'll constantly looking at these projects and plans,
It
and
just means it might have to wait a little.
it may, right.
One other question, and then, so there is a possibility that we will end up receiving some flood money? Does that, would we possibly use that toward the resurfacing of the track or other things that are flood related
So,
to decrease our?
so what the select woman
expenses.
is talking about is that in the supplemental budget that was just passed this week, there was some funding for reimbursements and other programming for communities that fell victim to disasters and storms in 2024. which is us. So we haven't really received, because it just happened, we haven't received what the plan's going to look like, what the program's going to look like, how do you apply. I'm very hopeful, right? So we have things that we are hoping are going to be covered by insurance. We have things we know are not. For instance, they don't cover infrastructure, right? So things like Waverly Road, right, we are going to have to look at. I mean, as you all know, due to the state of emergency, we're deficit spending. We have special permission deficit spend. And when you deficit spend, there's really kind of three options, right? You have a program that helps you, which is what I'm hopeful here. You have to make a free cash transfer to offset. Well, four options really. You cut things in the budget to try to absorb. Luckily for us, we have the finance committee reserve. So if we, right, I thank God. So we have that to go to. And then the final and worst option is to raise it in the following year. Now this supplemental budget that was passed also allowed us to spread that deficit over a 3-year period, which is great. If we do end up having to do that, I really don't want to, because it really does create issues in your budget moving forward, right? So you end up really moving needs back, and I don't want to see that. So we're going to be creative as we can over the next 6 months, and hopefully working with our state delegation, get some of that money to offset some of the costs that we see coming forward.
Can I ask? I see on the projects you have the field, the middle school field project.
We have, are you talking about Fields Master Plan?
Yeah, I wasn't. Maybe I misread. I thought you had.
So there's no changes right now to the Recplex, assume that's what you're talking about. We will be putting a CPC application in for that.
You know what? I did. I misread the field.
Yeah,
master
that's
plan.
okay. We haven't reflected that in here because we're still actively working with our lawyer and the judge in trying to move anything forward. But what you're seeing here is the Fields Master Plan implementation. So 2 years ago, working with Assistant Town Manager Burzlaff, Rick Gorman, D. Casey, we created, and all of the different user groups and stakeholders, we created a Fields Master Plan. There really hadn't been an investment in fields in a really long time. We were trying to figure out how we do that, and so these are the kind of first steps. So we've got in here McAvoy and the design of the high school fields.
Thanks.
Which field at the high school?
The design for the high school. So it says 2 phases of the high school, and it's basically all of it.
All the fields at the high school?
It's
Oh,
basically
okay.
all of it. And so we have that broken into 2 phases, but we're designing the entire thing at once because it's cheaper for us to do the design all at one time. So.
And McAvoy Construction is in that, and it accounts for the grant that we received. for
Right, so
pickleball.
we were lucky enough to get an earmark this year from the state to cover pickleball courts at McAvoy. One of the things, if you haven't met anyone who plays pickleball yet, they're very passionate about pickleball. And one of the things we heard loud and clear during our Fields Master Plan process is that pickleball is needed. And so with the senior center here, that was kind of a perfect spot for us to do them. So we're doing better walking paths there. We're doing the pickleball courts, and we're doing improvements to the dugout as well.
Is there any plan to improve any of the playground equipment there? I have seen, I mean,
I'm looking at Laurie on that.
relatively new, but I have heard a lot,
The zip line.
a lot of complaints about it.
Yeah, the zip line has been,
New structure.
all right,
Yeah.
To replace the zip line.
Replace the zip line
because that will
completely.
never
Right.
work out.
the zip line has been broken since
Since
the beginning of time.
Yes.
So they
Since like day one of the
yes.
project. being
So that was
finished.
removed and new piece of equipment is being put there. Installed tomorrow. Look at that.
There you go.
That's exciting.
Right.
Thank you, Laura.
Also,
While we're talking about McAvoy, are there any plans to work on the drainage? It still does not drain well if it rains a
at Laurie
little bit.
again.
The fields are.
I don't think there's drainage work. Do you remember?
Yeah.
On McAvoy? So
None of them, really none of them. because
they're
a lot of
paving the
people-
parking lot, so there are some drainage improvements that will help the fields.
also, the pickleball courts are not impacting the softball fields.
They are
I know
not.
that was a hot topic
on
as
the record
well.
for that?
Like,
Yeah.
they're not impacting the fields.
They are
It's
not.
they're separate
They are,
from.
yes.
So I know a lot of people had that concern.
Maybe parking. I'm worried about parking with additional things there during softball season. It might get a little hairy.
So I find that pickleball players typically play during the day.
During the week, during the day.
Yeah, during the week, during the day. So,
That's true.
yep, they typically. You can ask Rick Gorman, because they come to his building. They're usually during the day, during the week.
The large group of our older citizens will be playing during the day. We will have a popular sport with all the ages, so there will be some, but you'll see much more of the parking for them during the day than you will for the softball. It's replacing the area which we had the half-court basketball court, so there will be at times a little bit more, but I don't think it's gonna be as big of an issue as perceived.
I suspect most people would pull up to McAvoy, see all the softball cars, and continue on their way, and come back later.
The last couple of years, we've done a tournament, which is the youth center students versus the seniors. I think the seniors have won every time, right? Only once. They won. Yeah, so the seniors still have their bragging rights for the winner of the pickleball tournament. So,
Any other questions, comments? I would like to thank you and Lynn and all the department heads for, everybody in this room for all your hard work to get us to this point. I know it's a lot of work and to keep the buildings
Thank you very much.
moving forward, yeah.
And if you think you're going to be clear, don't worry, check it out.
Very, yeah.
The clear gov thing is amazing.
Yeah, it's very cool, yes, yep. So we'll start closing our meetings.
Yeah. Seconded by Nancy. All those in favor? Aye.
I'll move
We
to
are
adjourn the
adjourned.
school committee.
School committee?
I'll second.
Yes.
I said yes.
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 All right, we have a motion to
You-
adjourn,
you-
it's
you-
seconded and passed for the school committee.
All right, thank you. And our next select board meeting is January 8th, back in our select board room. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So adjourned.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. All right.